trends which we can extract from the various research and various forums and various scholars. There are 5 major trends which are going to dominate the global economy in the next decade or so. What happens after the decade? It is an evolving process. Number 1 is that technological advances are going to speed up and disrupt the existing processes of production, distribution, services, and that is going to be driven by AI. AI is still a very new concept. There are those who believe that AI would create more problems for the world, and there are others who believe that this will only supplement and complement human capabilities, and it will help the human beings. And the 4 major examples they give is the edutech, where the AI tutors can actually coach and guide each individual according to his or her capability and bring them up to the average as compared to the present system. Then you have the telehealth, where people sitting in the big hospitals in the urban areas can interact with their counterparts in the rural areas, in the remote areas, and guide them both as far as the diagnostic tools are concerned, but also as far as prescriptions are concerned. So the standard of healthcare should improve through that. And then you have agri-tech, where in Pakistan, for example, the average farmer is producing from the same ecological and agroecological zone 30 months of wheat, while the progressive farmer, which is neighbor, is producing 50 months. So through the satellites, through the sensors, you can control both the water use as well as the inputs use, and that will increase the productivity for the small farmers, and therefore it will boost their rural incomes, reduce the poverty, and also add to the purchasing power of the rural poor. And the 4th one is the fintech, where financial inclusion is much easier. For example, Ant International in China is got the scorecard, the credit scorecard, based on the pattern of the individual's past transactions, where in 15 minutes or 20 minutes, they can assign the score, whether this individual is creditworthy or not, and for how much amount. And now the other banks are taking advantage of that methodology and using that for their creditworthiness score. So it's a huge potential to include those who are not gaining from the present system. So to me, these are the 4 elements which we should try to maximize for the benefit of the poor, the vulnerable, the excluded, which are really deserving of our support. The second change which is taking place is the demographic change, and it's very obvious. For example, Japan has now minus 0.7% fertility decline every year. The dependency ratio in Japan has now gone to the extent that 2 individuals working have to support 1 senior in order to survive the same. And a monolithic, homogeneous, linguistic, culturally proud society has for the first time decided to open up its borders for the foreign workers. And so is Korea going to do that. And this trend is going to go to Germany also. While we in the South Asia region have surplus labor, and therefore there should be a transition from the surplus to the deficit countries. And all this talk about the right-wing parties resisting the immigration, they're not opposed to the skilled manpower coming in. During the last few years, the number of foreign workers in OECD countries has gone up from 1 million to 3.5 million. And the foreign population, born population, has actually increased in Europe. So all you may hear about the, very extreme rightist party, they need to maintain their standard of living. And countries like Pakistan have to adapt themselves in order to provide the kind of skills and also train them in the social skills as well as the language in order to fit in the labor market. The third trend is that of climate change. And this gathering, I don't have to repeat what the climate change is doing. From my perspective as a development economist, in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, because we have a common origin of the water resources, we have to think about how best to share and manage this for the best advantage of the majority of the population in these countries. If you politicize the water resource management, we will have famines, we will have the water scarcity, we will have a humanitarian crisis. So whatever you may do with the SDGs, you will not be able to do this because 2 billion people are dependent on the glaciers, which are melting in the HHK and which are going to create shortages on energy, food, and water. The fourth element, which is now becoming quite apparent, that from 1990 to 2015, that's why Millennium Development Goals were able to achieve remarkable progress as far as poverty reduction was concerned. From 2.2 billion poor by 2015, we were down to 800 million people. A remarkable change. Even if you exclude China, which had 700 million people out of poverty, you will still have a very significant reduction in poverty levels. And the share of the emerging and developing countries, both in the global GDP as well as in the global trade, has actually equaled that of the advanced countries. And therefore, there was a lot of shared prosperity in the emerging and developing countries. Unfortunately, this is not going to be the case now. You have leaders who are very much inward-looking in the West, who are nationalistic, who are protectionist, and they will not allow the same forces of trade flows, financial flows, migration flows, technology transfer, which propelled this revolution between 1990 to 2015 to repeat itself. So deglobalization demands that there should be more cooperation in the South and South among the regional countries, and the countries themselves have to pull up their socks and become more self-reliant rather than depending on the external forces. And finally is the global geopolitical situation. Are we going to have a unipolar world where after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States was the only powerful nation in the world, and they were the hegemony of the rest of the world? Now we are talking of G2, where China is now being recognized as a force equal to the United States, although their per capita income is not very high. But ladies and gentlemen, you may not realize that the research has shown that out of 64 emerging technologies, 53 emerging technologies, China is the leader for the future. These are emerging technologies for the future. And the human capital is such that in 1999, the STEM graduates from China were 1/2 of that of the United States. In 2024, the STEM graduates coming out of the Chinese universities are 3 million, while from the United States it's only 500,000. So both on human capital and technology, which are the driving force for the future, you have a giant which is coming up. And that means that there will be competition. And the developing countries have to align like the Cold War between the Soviet Union or the United States. In my personal views, this should not happen. We should be quite sovereign and autonomous in making our choices. And that's why we have to go for a multipolar world. And the South and South and the regions like South Asia should work together in order to help ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishrat Hussain, for your very valuable input. And this topic is not very easy to perceive. When we start thinking about what it is going to be beyond 2030, it looks like as if we have, we have exhausted all the options. But let's see, there's always hope. So with this, I would, because he has set the tone for the plenary, so I would just request the panelists to reflect on how do you see, or to reflect on the overall concept that we have proposed for this session. What it is going to be beyond 2030, what lessons have we learned, or were there lessons that we couldn't learn? So I'll start from Mr. Muhammad Yahya, please.
It's better, no? Okay, great. For inviting me. This is one of those, when I was told I have to be in this panel, I thought, should I think freely or should I focus more on my terms of reference, which really relates to what the beyond 2030 looks in relation to the role of the UN. So first, I mean, I don't have to repeat, I'm sure the last few, yesterday and today, you've had a lot about a changing world. But I also think we're also the guessing stage on how that world that is changed will look like. Of course, the easiest thing that humans do normally is to go back to say, okay, we had a singular dominant country after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now we have other countries that have emerged specifically in Asia. So we will go back to a multipolar world. I am not so sure. I just don't know where we're going. I mean, it's all guesswork at this stage. It's been like you're in a roller coaster, not knowing where the station will end. But I think what matters most is to ask ourselves, how are countries prepared to deal with a changing world? And the number one thing, as was just said by our guest of honor here, is to say that how resilient and how ready it is to face that world, whatever that world may look like. And I think the discussions that started yesterday, if you look from a development perspective, we know that ODA is going down and down. I can't see it going back to any level that we've had in the past. While countries that have been very generous in supporting the development of other countries have cut, while they announce those cuts, there's nobody on the streets in their country saying, don't cut, right? So as they spend more money on defense, there's no counter, there's no civil society in the rich countries that are saying, hey, why are you cutting the funds for these developing countries? So there isn't an appetite in developing countries, in developed countries, to finance the development of emerging countries. So in that context, what do we expect from 2030, after 2030 in the SDGs? I think it's important to remember that the SDGs are not just a set of goals we have to achieve, but they were a recognition of our common humanity, that somebody who's poor in Bhutan is the responsibility of everybody to get them out of that poverty. So the goals were recognition that we are in this precarious globe, and then we share some commonalities, and that we wanted to support each other. But what we've seen since the goals around the 10th year is the solidarity has ended. There's less funding available for the SDGs. The gap is about $500 billion to get us back to where we need to be in the remaining years. And there's very little opportunity available. So going back to the question of this panel, where are we expected to go? So there are a few scenarios. One is to say, by 2030, the world will get their senses back, and we will have new goals and new opportunities for financing. There will be reforms of the IFIs. There'll be more representative of the world rather than representing only few interests. And we will recommit to our common humanity. You know, they say that no man is an island in time itself, and that's the idea of SDGs. Therefore, let's do that. So that is a rosy scenario, but I haven't had any expert in the last few years. I see Senator Sheikh Rahman is here and others. I haven't had any expert telling me that after 2030 we will be more energized and we'll recommit to our common humanity. So that is the rosy one. But then I work for the UN. My job is to be hopeful. Right? That is my terms of reference, is to say that the world will be a better world tomorrow. But that's one scenario. What are the other scenarios? The other scenarios, the ones that are more likely to come out, is a scenario where we will accelerate what we have, a transactional world where we will cooperate only on few areas that are of common interest. Some call it going back to basics. And us who are in development, we've been told more and more, get out of all these other things you started working on and focus on the basic structures of shared, how to share a world, and allow countries to do more and more by themselves. And let's not pay for them. I think that is the dominant perspective of recent. Not everywhere, but some of the major countries have made it very clear this is what they want. They want to focus, especially when it comes to the UN, focus on the work of ITU, how we pack our satellites in the globe, focus on issues around maritime security, focus on peace and security, and get out of issues of climate. Don't deal with anything to do with greening. That is not your job. Let nations deal with themselves. So a world where it's transactional and we cooperate on only few areas where we share some, at least consensus. Or there's a third part, which is a hybrid system of between an extreme version of doing one or two, 3 areas, but also recognizing few areas, including climate, we need to cooperate. Now, on the UN side, and I said this in my opening speech yesterday here, that we need to get out of small little projects. That's my obsession about this. The UN has become so involved in tiny little projects that do not transform countries, and we need to focus more on small technical support to governments. What makes the UN very unique is if the government of Pakistan asks us for help on a technical area, at the end of that process, we're not giving them loans, or we don't have any other interest. So how do we ensure that the UN becomes a high-level technical support to government, and less on projects, and less on service delivery, substituting the state both at the provincial and at the federal level? So this is some of the thoughts I have in relation to what will come, but unfortunately, as though things look bleak in terms of global solidarity and cooperation, I'm hopeful that the world by 2030 will wake up and realize actually everything we share is important to global security and peace. So if you look at it from only a peace perspective, then mass poverty leads to mass migration. Mass poverty leads to violent extremism and instability. That this all development and SDGs are a security issue. And if we're able to convince those who look only through the lens of security, then investing in people, giving every child in the world an opportunity to realize their full potential is part of that investment. And I think this is the argument we need to make as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Yahya. And indeed, a message of hope, if UN is giving, I think we all should remain hopeful, because if we are optimistic about our development agenda, I think we can still try to make some progress. Otherwise, everyone will think that what is the use of making progress if there's nothing beyond 2030? So thank you for your remarks. With this, we have got the perspective from United Nations, as it is essentially the UN agenda. And then I would now request Mr. Harun Sharif for his remarks also, if you can join us at the podium. And then we will also seek some regional perspective around the session. But with this, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Senator Sherry Rahman for this plenary. Madam, thank you so much for joining us. And I think from the government side, having you with us for this special plenary, it couldn't have been better. So thank you. She's also former Minister for Climate Change, and she has been extremely vocal around the overall development agenda, not just climate change. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Harun Sharif.
Thank you very much, honorable panelists. Thank you for SDPI for organizing this important session. And stage has already been set, and we have also heard the view of one of the multilaterals, a good multilateral, a little bit in trouble, but yes, a good multilateral. I think where we are living, I don't want to repeat which my colleagues have already mentioned. It's a time of high risk. Generally, we are looking at countries with the lens of high risk, you know. Why? It's a time of uncertainty. Everybody sees that things are uncertain. It's been pointed out, it's very hard to predict the future. Very large advisory or consulting firms has stopped doing forecasting even for large companies for more than 6 months. So the models being developed are very fluid, and they take cognizance of zillions of factors affecting change, unknown factors, exogenous factors. Unpredictability, particularly in global leadership, it has made life more interesting. We are also seeing realignment of the South as well as other countries in this risky and uncertain world. So what are a few of the trends? And I actually appreciate Dr. Ishrat setting the stage and highlighting the trends like AI will define the future of many industries and countries. It will make or break several models. There are a few things which I would like to speak a little bit about. I think overall rule-based system in the world is being challenged. Human factor somehow does not feature in today's politics the way it was. I hear the word poverty reduction less and less in this global world. I hear about conflicts. I hear about challenging. I hear about threats. I hear about, basically either you are on my side or you are on the other side. Where are the people in this equation? I think development countries and South has to rethink where the much larger, younger population exists. So people-centric policies need to come into, this whole thing. How? I will come to it in a minute. So in this risk, basically the climate risk, the AI risk, which has been highlighted, the geopolitical risk, the conflict risk. So where is the hope? Where do we go from there? This is now the new normal, as we say. We got to live with it. Multilateral system seriously threatened. A, because of its delivery, with due respect to my friend from the UN, for the past 30 years, we've been talking closing down small shops and doing something big or one or two interventions. We need to reflect that why are we failing to deliver development? The word development is at the moment interpreted in several ways. At one point in time, the old school development was economic development, human development. Now we have even clubbed with the shrinking resources. What we have done is the humanitarian relief is now called development, which was looked at it separately. So the challenges are huge, but obviously there are certain trends. It's a messy transition, the way I see the world today. Be it the multipolarity, that how to deal with multiple partners, be it is building resilience. The role of the state itself is being questioned. Is state really responsive to people, or are they really playing in the power politics? There is a ray of hope today in New York, so that people have spoken in New York. So there is something, people think that people are looking for a positive change. But with this whole thing, I would, only focus on two parts. Number one, where will the money come from? The region we are sitting in, it's a debt-stressed region. Not only Pakistan, but if you look at South Asia, almost 70% to GDP is debt repayments. Now that's a very serious threat if you're looking for development of over 2 billion people. How will you build institutions when the global institutions are threatened because of the fundings are squeezing, the problems are different, aid is being closed down. You mentioned ODA, which has done some good job, but ODA, by the way, is Overseas Development Assistance, which lots of countries put in to help out the countries which are looking for, longer term money. So in this, I think the countries like Pakistan and the regional countries need to think about institutional solutions of partnership. So first transition, which I would recommend, is a transition from being taught from the Western institutions to a model of partnership where you actually build the critical mass in your own, countries and regions and sub-regions. I think the global financial architecture has practically at the moment is at a stage where they cannot offer solutions because of politics, because of their own, complacency, because of lots of other things. Countries like Pakistan, frankly speaking, we are still living in a world where we think that somebody will come and, write a check for you if there is a catastrophe. We still think the donors will put in money in the state kitty and, we will start using it. What happens is at the end of the day, we keep on accumulating more and more debt rather than getting, leveraging money for development and growth and revival of growth, which is the biggest challenge. We spent, for instance, we have the former Minister of Climate Change sitting here. We spent a lot of time on loss and damage fund. I think that's where we need to invest a lot more in understanding what's happening in global development system and what's happening in global, multilateral system. We go with the old approaches, then we get frustrated because we don't get the response. UN are still good guys, but frankly, I see in 5 years down the road, their role being totally redefined, if not, unfortunately, being eroded, which is a threat to the system. Now, in this system, how do we go from a human-centric, human development-centric politics and policies? That is what SDGs are all about at the end of the day. Now, can we make this a political priority? That we make policies basically for the people, and we try and invest in the new skill mix needed in this changing world. In 1978, Singapore changed its skill model from efficiency-based to knowledge-based. Today, Singapore, a tiny country, exports $300 billion worth of knowledge products. Now, that is where the partnerships with the West and the partnership with other countries need to be done. There is a ray of hope which I see, which I think we need to look at more, what President Xi is talking in his Global Development Initiative, which is quite aligned about, better environment, prosperity for people, aligning with SDGs. So there is at least one voice talking about, a people-centric, better quality of life and a stability approach. Now, can we adopt that? Because that approach might not have the free money for the governments, the way Western system has influenced our societies and structures. Now, in future, there will be no aid, frankly, for countries like Pakistan, very clearly. Better if we come out of denial and start finding our own solutions. For countries like Pakistan, I just fail to understand our banking sector has made bumper profits. Why can't we set up a climate bank of ourselves, which can partner with a number of countries in the world, frankly speaking? We are setting up, government keeps on borrowing more and more from our banking system. I think we need to look at what are the fault lines of the South and align ourselves. Leveraging your own house by building a critical mass is easier in the coming world, rather than keep on looking at the traditional people to dole out money and give you freebies. Where is the private sector in this whole equation? I did not hear much about it. Private sector has become so powerful, so big. There is so much liquidity in the region. That liquidity is not going to come to government budgets. If governments are thinking that people will write a check, which our current rulers are trying to see from China and Saudi Arabia and other, and struggling, we need to come up with governance structures. We need to come up with private sector-led interventions in partnership. Offer them something, in return take something. I think that's where we are getting into. I am very worried about, although Dr. Ishrat has mentioned that in OECD countries, migration of skilled people have increased, but I honestly think that the quality of life in lots of Western countries for immigrants, it's getting troublesome. Now, so can they come back? Can we create opportunities for them? I will close on just one line. I think we need to come out of denial. We need to break away from the global financial architecture. We need to come up with local solutions of financing, leverage it through partnerships within the region. The changing dynamics are very clear that the influences, there has to be multiple partners, but please delegate things from the state. State itself is struggling to run their own house. How can they help really people? So I think it's a partnership model of delegation and knowledge partnership, converging expertise. I really don't see the World Banks of this world and others really helping us other than giving us more loans. So let's first be a reality check, a baseline, and start building brick by brick to a very uncertain and unpredictable world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harun Sharif. With this, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Prem Kumara from IGS. Sir, if you can also please shed some light or reflect on whatever you have heard so far in context of Agenda 2030. IGS is supporting South Asia Circular Economy Forum and also providing support in context of National Circular Economy Policy being developed by the government of Pakistan. Please.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you very much for first inviting me for this very prestigious panel. So I don't know what I want to say after hearing a very remarkable speech. But yeah, let me see the issue with another way, because I'm getting now 55 years old. I think my age, not young, the age that seen the change, because I was not in the age that to look at seeing the Second World War, and that's happened that time. So I born after that, where the countries are starting boom after the Second World War too. Then I'm now passing my age, looking at something similar happen in another wars everywhere. I'm also getting old, so my age is going to finish. But we are in the something world experiencing same examples with the change of the time period. So this is for me very interesting, because I have two kids also, boys. So one of the day, my one of elder son come and ask me, Dad, can I our team interview you? Because I'm a researcher in principle, so I'm doing environmental research, and their school make a team and ask each team to interview your fathers. So then my son said, my father is a researcher. He doing a lot of research work, traveling internationally, supporting countries. And then the team said, okay, let's interview your father. So then they came to my office and interview me. And then they asked, okay, Dad, what is your job? So I said, I'm supporting governments to develop plans and policies and for next 30 years, 40 years. So we are working with them how to change the governments and the policies. Then he asked for me, okay, you guys are doing very good job. So, but who gave you the permission to make a plan for next 30 years? Because it's not your time, it's our time. That's give us to plan our time. It is not your time. I think that's a very make me something very panic, because I didn't expect such kind of comments from the kids, something like 40 years, 30 years. And they said, and then I think a little bit about, I think that is what this, for my point for this meeting is SDG, because what the real simple thing is SDG or sustainable development. So we do something now better to protect in the future. That's something very simple way we are looking at the sustainable development. So I think, yes, that's what we had to do something. So, but we're normally thinking to do something future, but not doing something now. So I think this is very important, this meeting. I think that in that sense, this conference is very important. We need to take something to do now, but thinking about future to protect now. So in that way, I think it is very important, everybody. So another one is my consideration of thinking, because then we're doing these things, I also practice because of my things, because I feel always now we're discussing challenges. My previous one also mentioned no hopes. We feel everything is problem. But I also feel I have my experience, very nice thing happened in my younger period. So we live in the community is very harmful, and we work together, and our parents take care of us. So it's not everything for me bad. It's very nice thing was happen, but the thing is changing. So I don't know. I had to admit sometimes some changes, because I'm not good at IT or technology. It's getting better. So now without my iPod or something, I cannot go and I living in Japan. So restaurant and order because waiter not come to me. And the robot is coming, and I had to I had to order from my my mobile phone the thing. So for me, it is very difficult, but as an older guy, but that's the society now we are living. So this changes how we look at in which way it is a challenge or it is a way that we had to respect. Or that's I think the very difficult situation for us in the future and at the moment on looking at these things. So I feel I'm still very optimistic. I feel yes, we have challenges, but at the same time, we have some hopes. But it's need to be not one party because we cannot blame government because I work with government. So then the government blame private sector, then the private sector blames government. Both are blamed to public. That's the way we cannot to solve this problem. I think we need everybody to work together and think about how to work on the sustainable development goals on the future. And then I also feel like we know that everybody we are debt, but I also that one also my perspective is something different because I'm looking at the home, so I'm not taking loan if I cannot pay. So that's the system. Normally we take even in the house, I want to take a loan to make a house. So I plan how can I pay back my loan? So I think our government also had to think about in that way, taking loan to pay loan, and this ways is always debt. It's nobody want to say it is a debt because it is need to be paid. So I think these kind of things a little bit. I'm looking at more on we had to think about it is not the blame for other people, it is blame for us and how everybody we are working on the achieving SDG goals. I think that's where we had to be think about in the future implementation of SDG. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumara. Our last speaker, Mr. Ravi Shankar Senju, Vice Chair SOTI, Nepal. Sir, can you please join us?
Put here. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank SIDP to invite me here in this program and give me an opportunity to speak in these special issues. It is an honor to be here today, not just to speak, but to represent a voice and a vision, a nation poised in a critical juncture of history. Today, I will share my Nepal's rethinking in future, and in doing so, offer a new model for global priorities also. We stand here not as a passive victim of global trend, but a potential pioneer ready to translate our unique challenges into the unparalleled opportunities. In recent time, this UN analysis, Nepal has, in 2024, Nepal has attained all the 3 criteria for LDC graduations. So we are going to graduate in 2026 November. That has already been decided by the UN. But while, reviewing the progress report of the SDG, there are severe gap. We have to be very critical on that part. The gap between the aspiration and reality. The global finding that only 15% of target are on the track resonate deeply in Nepal. Our critical performance gap are not just about the slow progress, but about the regression in the face of overlapping crisis. major gaps I want to highlight here: poverty and inequality. We have reduced income poverty that has already been seen in the analysis, multidimensional poverty also, lack of access to sanitation, clean energy, and nutrition remain unaddressed. The gap between the rich and poor and between the urban center and like in Kathmandu and in the remote Karnali region is taking time both for a social cohesion. That is the major problem now we are facing. We are battling a shift from famine to a silent crisis of malnutrition, high rate of stunting and wasting among the children, exacerbated by the climate-induced disruption to the agriculture. Mean we are failing to build a fundamental pillar of human capital. We have to be very critical in that part. And another is definitely the climate action. This is our most glaring gap. Our nation plan are robust on paper, but implementation is very slow and critically underfunded. The gap between our climate vulnerabilities and our adaptive capacity is very vast and widening. So we are very serious on that part also. The central lesson is that soil approach have failed. We cannot address hunger without addressing the climate resilience, resilient agriculture. We cannot address poverty without tackling the inequality and creating decent jobs. The post-2030 framework must be inherently integrated, recognizing these inter-child linkages. Our second lesson is urgent need to strengthen the sub-national governance under the federal system, ensuring SDG localization is effective and equitable. That is the main problem we are facing. Now I will just slightly highlights on the geopolitical shift and economic nationalism. A hostile global environment is here now. A global reallocation of spending towards the defense away from the development creates a perfect storm for a country like Nepal. We are facing dramatic reduction in the oxygen, climate and development finance. We need to survive and develop. The specific implications for Nepal are the end of business as usual. The traditional development partnerships are becoming unreliable. Donor priorities are shifting towards their own strategic interests, which may not align with Nepal's national needs, such as building climate resilient infrastructure and strengthening federal governance. Nepal finds itself in a delicate position between the regional giants and the global powers. The new era of every nation for itself focuses us to navigate a complex landscape where our non-aligned policy is tested daily. The risk is that our development agenda gets hacked by geopolitical competitions. We are also facing the dilemma on gun versus butter. A nation facing both internal and regional security challenge, global pressure to increase the military spending poses an impossible choices. Even every rupees diverted to a defense is a rupees taken away from building a school, hospital, irrigation system, and our first line of defense against the climate change and poverty. Now I will slightly discuss on the future of global cooperations. From multilateralism to unilateralism, the future of cooperation is bleak if the current trend of continues. We are moving from inclusive multilateralism to an exclusive club and transaction alliance. For a small vulnerable nation like Nepal, this is alarming. Our voice risks is being drowned out. So what we should do it for the future cooperation? We must champion reform multilateralism. Global institutions must be more representative and responsive to the need of the most vulnerable and not just the, just the most powerful. We must pivot towards the pragmatic regionalism. The future cooperation for Nepal lies reinvigorating SAARC and BIMSTEC for practical collaborations on shared challenges, managing transboundary rivers, creating regional energy hubs, and coordinating the disaster response. We must deepen ties with the other developing nations to share the knowledge, technology, and advocate collectively for a fairer global system. The bottom line is the future of cooperation cannot be based on charity. It must be based on shared responsibility and mutual interest. The stability and climate resilience of Nepal is in the direct interest of the entire South Asian region and the world. That we are thinking on that line also. And what are the other possibilities? A framework built on the justice, not just the aspirations. The post-2030 framework must be fundamentally different. It cannot be another list of ambitious goals. Nepal must, with the ambitious goal, without binding mechanism for accountability in finance. So Nepal focus on Center for Climate Resilience. The new framework must have climate adaptation and resilience its core pillar, not a standard goal. It must be backed by a legally binding mechanism. Another is adopt a vulnerability index. And third is formalize a common but differential responsibilities. And last is focus on depth justice. So at the last, what I think that together we can bridge the gap and power a sustainable future for all living, no landlocked country behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very rich perspective that we have heard from all our panelists, Pakistan's perspective, South Asia's perspective, and development side perspective, as well as UN's perspective. Now, coming towards what do we perceive and how it should be coming towards from a country that has been suffering, and what is the way forward, what are the challenges. I think we couldn't have invited a better person for this discussion. I would now like to invite Senator Sherry Rahman, Chair Standing Committee on Climate Change, for her remarks. Madam, if you can please join us at the podium. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ladies and gentlemen, SDPI, Mr. Abid Suleri, Mr. Muhammad Yahya, Ishrat Hussain, others at the podium. I don't have a name list in front of me, but I should be recognizing everyone who has spoken with great clarity and depth on something that is wide open, including Harun Sharif Saab and Mr. Jagat, and would you please give me the name of the last speaker? Ravi Shankar. I've heard you before, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a viewpoint about global development, which is not very different from what I heard Muhammad Yahya speaking about. So I have a challenge here. People are sleepy, tired, and this is the last person speaking. And, women surely have to do better than the men here. So let's be a little provocative. I do think that the crisis of multilateralism is a very serious one. It is something that we don't take much note of here because obviously we are embedded in our own multiple crises. But when Abid Suleri says that sustainable development in the emerging world disorder is a challenge, then I think we do need to take notice that the thought leadership at a very evidence-based organization like SDPI is also taking note of the disruptive kind of context we live in. And, my view is that we're living in an extraordinary era of what I call anxiety and disruption, because we are, this time that we are passing through at the transition is really defined by staggering shifts in human history. And why I say this is not just because AI has taken over much of the world and we are not able to assess where it will go and how much of our water it will use. We don't talk about that because it's really not convenient, but I would like to hear about this at another time. I do think that global development, ladies and gentlemen, is no longer possible because if you're looking at shared development, we're talking about, my topic was reimagining global development. Now, that's no longer possible because that requires a trajectory of peace, and it also needs to be embedded in an architecture of law. As we know and see around us, that is under severe challenge. Now, global development has been around us, and so has sustainable development as an end goal since the post-World War era. But I say this because the rise of political illiberalisms, hardening nationalisms, and a dangerous surge in hot and simmering conflicts in several theaters, wars in fact, not seen since the last World War, the highest number, should give us real cause for, strategic pause. And that should make us think that development does not take place in a social or political vacuum, which is why you are seeing funding cuts everywhere. And I'm sorry, it's become very trendy to say funding doesn't matter. I mean, public international funding doesn't matter. That's exactly what people want us to think and say. It does. It's an entitlement. It's what men say to women, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. No, it matters. When you are vulnerable, when you are living on the edge of fragility and unable to connect all the dots even at home, then it matters. And it is up to us to decide what matters, where we take our conversations, where we take development goals, and what we do with our existing resources, except our existing resources are under severe challenge and stress. Now, you have wars in West Asia, Africa, Europe, and in our home, we have conflict. South Asia is very conflict-ridden. And if you're confused about West Asia, I mean what used to be called the Middle East. I mean, there is no such thing as a Middle East if we decolonize our discourse. So that is all ongoing, and it is ongoing because of a lack of laws and an investment in global military spending is now the focus. So at the NATO, at the Hague summit, for instance, NATO countries pledged to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. That's what's happening beyond this decade. The world is going back towards wars, tribalisms, illiberalisms, and very hardened national postures. In this context, global military spending is now set to reach 6.6 trillion by 2035 if current trends persist. This will have severe impacts on the world we live in, on how we define national identities, and what we expect from sustainable development or global development in any context. And naturally, if this becomes the new global abnormal, it just should not become the normal, but it does pose an existential threat to development and climate spending, and climate is no longer a niche view. I think in all our views, and in the collective forum that is sitting here, most of the thought leadership in the world has now become fragmented around what used to be a unified pole of thinking. That thinking too is fragmented like the global responses. So you're not going to have global development reemerge in any fashion until conflict settles down, because conflict makes countries think of how they can manage resources within the country, what they need to spend on their militaries, and how to protect their populations. Now, protecting population can, of course, be another favorite theme to sing to, but it does, we all know, divert resources from very, very basic, fundamental entitlements that citizens should have or don't have, that actually enables their resilience. Now, resilience too has become a very, very common buzzword used in climate discourse and development discourse, just like SDGs. And the UN too acknowledges that less than 15% of global SDG targets are on track. So, and they're not one, it's not a checklist, they're all connected as part of a larger global picture. But nearly half have either stagnated or regressed, even when we faced what is known as a better world. During the decade of the better world, we didn't go terribly far. I'm sorry. I'm not holding a candle for gloom here, and I'm not a UN shall we say, stalwart, but I agree with Mr. Yaya here that hope is the only currency for any of us to engage in, because without that, even politicians would not know what to say or do. And doing is very important here. So, with the return of geopolitics, we're finding that nature is not the only thing that is red in tooth and claw. So is geopolitics. It's bringing wars back in a very rules-light era. So without rules, you cannot navigate your development, what is your entitlement, and also what you see multilateralism as navigating your own future. So when I say that, it means how, if our SDGs are off track, can we leverage the power of and the waning power of multilateralism to secure our own futures? Now, as we speak, we have completely unaligned goals to a population that is growing very fast, to lack of data here, which doesn't tell us whether we are urban or rural. And the World Bank now says you're 88% urban. That's the new data coming up. Now, that's a big, big number for a country that is not able to provide solid waste management in its cities across the board. Why does that matter, much less than other glamorous subjects? Because that is the heart of and core of sanitation, of health, public health issues. Everything is embedded around it. The entire what is known as WASH sector. But it is core to how a population responds to crisis, whether it's climate, whether it's heat, whether it's rain, whether it's a meteor coming in, or whatever, even war. Cities and rural areas that have a system that enables economic or public well-being are able to face a catastrophic and volatile and unpredictable future with far more resilience and wherewithal than cities that are not. Now, one of the few accomplishments we've made over the years in our climate discourse, and circularity, of course, is that we now have jugs on the table. You know, this is a public conversation that doesn't go very far, because downstream you'll still see plastic bottles that are choking your storm drains. Why does that matter? If you look around in the middle of a flood, you will see plastic bags choking your storm drains. That's what It's not perishables. It's plastic. It does not, if you're going to ask any city mayor, he'll tell you that, or she will tell you that in Pakistan. That's what's going on. And Pakistan is consuming and using so much more plastic than we should that we have lost all count of it. We are barely recycling 1%. So don't be listening to anyone who tells you we are recycling. The world is also recycling only barely 9%. It's all been one big joyride. And so it's time to look inwards. We can ask for 2-3 big things and a bigger picture, but I do want to bring this conversation to a close on looking at what we can do for ourselves, because as someone here said, I think Harun said, our houses, we have to look inwards. And my theory always is based on the reality that no one is coming for you other than Moyaya's agency, which will also find its actions restricted given the cuts it is facing. What are you going to do when there's another catastrophe? We keep going back to resetting our development cycles every time there's a climate disaster. These are no longer 10-year-old episodes. These are not decade episodes anymore. They're recurring more and more frequently, and they set you in what I call a resilience trap. While your economy is barely recovering from the exogenous shock, you are unable to rebuild on the ground, and you're facing perhaps a different kind of climate disaster. Those are not going away if you have for 4 years running 53 degrees centigrade in the summer in the south of Pakistan. Balochistan and Sindh face that. And just for context, in case anybody here is talking to Europe or is from Europe or goes to Europe, Europe closes down at 40 degrees centigrade in terms of declaring a climate emergency. We have to push and prod when we have 1/3 of the country underwater, one way or the other, to declare a climate emergency, because we're just not used to thinking that way. So think fests such as these are very important. They nudge us into more real ways of thinking. And I want to also point to one or two macro points here. One is that we have a persistent economic volatility, and our own trajectory on SDGs or anything else may reflect the global slowdown, which is uneven, fragile, and under mounting fiscal and climate stress. Pakistan will continue to face this kind of crisis because we are unable to imagine a future where our debt has been reset. You need a debt reset. Otherwise, we'll still keep struggling in larger and larger numbers, with larger and larger numbers of mounting debt, of resources and federal bureaus of collection that simply cannot catch up with the trillions escaping their net. Now, you can call us rent-seeking elites, you can say what you want, but the point is that's not happening. The resources you need to reset your economic growth and spur it at the percentages you need is not going to happen without that debt reset. Because just look at the numbers. You have Pakistan debt servicing consumes 46.7% of our federal budget this year, and it amounted to 8.2066 trillion. That's huge. You then have a calculation that emerges from the World Bank, because no one else is doing it, that in 2022, that Pakistan needs at least $348 billion by 2030 to become sustainable. Then the climate ministry says this year, as it submits its NDCs for the very expensive COP taking place in Brazil, that you have 565 billion needed to make an energy transition by just 2035. Please look at these numbers. There has got to be a big reality gap here between numbers and outcomes. So clearly, something transformational is needed. It's not going to happen in the increment. The power of the increment is always powerful. And yes, the private sector is an engine for growth everywhere in the world. But in Pakistan, it's been squeezed out for all sorts of reasons. And here, I've never seen the private sector, which is what we're told constantly at the COPs. That's the new thing. You know, the markets will help find capital that is de-risked and bring them to the doorstep. For God's sake, the private sector works for profit. It does not rush to the front lines of catastrophe to sink money into what it sees as ground that is saline. It does not in the numbers you need. So many countries are in this debt trap. Pakistan is not the only one. But at the multilateral level, we have been talking about this. And a few years ago, I mean, there was a Paris conference, not the famous Paris conference, but President Macron had organized one in which the financial architecture of the post-war order, the Bretton Woods infamous system, was meant to be reset to handle the realities and challenges and deficits of the emerging 21st century. It's a very tough century, and people have not understood it if they think that these institutions, the RSIs, the MDBs, even the IMF, can address the challenges. Or it's either that, or there's a great moral failing. And there is an understanding of that, and the moral failing is underwriting the failure to act. So the global architecture is no longer designed to face the 21st century, at least for developing countries. It's not anything new that I'm not saying anything new. It's something even Pakistan has articulated from time to time. But, you know, developing countries that are indebted and running in IMF programs, our finance ministers are afraid to say this because they worry that their stock starts crashing. They're afraid to say this. So, I mean, really, that's the least I can do, that, you know, we have a problem. No substantive financing, development, or climate today is coming here without debt. None at all. Every dollar that arrives as support comes with interest, conditionality, and a shrinking space for development sovereignty. For many of us in the global south, this has become an impossible paradox. To borrow our way out of climate disasters we did not cause. I'm happy to take on a conversation at our disastrous climate governance, but that's a separate conversation, isn't it? Let's not mix them up. We get very caught up on how we built on the wrong riverbed when there's a disaster, which is very important because lessons must be learned. But let's not keep our discourse colonized here anymore. Let's understand that, you know, there are 40% of the world's carbon emissions were produced by a couple of countries, and we've heard this, it bears repeating. 10 nations accounted for 75%, yet the same 10 received around 85% of global green financing. Pakistan has to compete for green financing with countries that can build, what is it called? Bankable projects. You need serious capacity for knowledge for building bankable projects. But that's the whole game. You build bankable projects, you compete internationally, and then maybe you'll get, you know, $40 million. And if you don't use it the first year it's come in, then it starts degrading and it's $30 million. And the next year it's probably lapsed. And then when you say, oh, no, I need it for our alert systems, early warning systems, which the UN Secretary General rightly says is a fundamental right, because that's what saves lives in volatile latitudes and longitudes, which is where we are. You then have a problem where you have a climate disaster, you have a flood, and your Prime Minister's office rightly says that you have to repurpose this money. We need to send it for social support to the doorsteps of the millions that are now without food and shelter and their buffalo, for instance, right? So those livelihoods need support. That money in this constant climate attack that we have, catastrophe, that money then goes to the front lines of saving lives. So it should. I mean, this has happened to me as climate minister. I'm like, no, this money I've managed to save. And it was also alone, no grants, horrifically. And we have people dying of climate catastrophe, yet we are passing that money back onto the front lines of just survival. So this is a new subsistence livelihood. There are no lifestyles here. There's just subsistence livelihoods. And there's more and more of them on the ground. So I'm not going to take too much of your time, but what I would like, since you asked it reimagined, is other than the debt reset, I would like to talk about one thing we don't bother to talk about. We'll go back to COP and everybody will talk about quantified collective goals and how they're failing us, and 300 billion was supposed to come in, but of course it's not. And this trope will carry on. And Pakistan, countries like Pakistan with very few emissions, or all of Africa with 4% emissions of the global pie, and Pakistan less than 1%, will be asked to produce NDCs, nationally determined contributions. The whole thing is about NDCs. We get caught up in that discourse, and everybody is rushing to submit new NDCs for decarbonizing your economy. Very good, decarbonize you. You must submit new NDCs. But what I want to see now is the UNFCCC, please pass this on, country representative, is we would like to see internationally determined contributions, IDCs. What are those? Those are the monies, the funds promised, pledged, but not released to the global south, because that's what the Paris Agreement is about. That is at the heart of our interest in COPs, in the Conference of Parties, not just NDCs, but IDCs too. So if we're talking about global equity, which I'm grateful that the United Nations still continues to favor, then that has to be the case too. We want to see a transparent accounting of where that green financing is going, what climate finance is even defined as. Why that matters is not because I'm being a professor here. That matters because it's not mixed up with ODA and passed off as green financing, because that's the fun kind of norm these days. So the general ODA you are giving as a country, you call it the green financing. So you've covered both bases. We would like that. We would like the term clarified. But there's a general reluctance to do so every single COP. If we're going to talk about that. So going back to all of this, globally, just look at the amounts. Asia requires $1.11 trillion annually to adapt to climate impacts. So where are we getting the money? There's no money. There's no money, there's no money. But yet there is. It is in the money going to subsidies to fossil fuels, which is $7 trillion. Please check the IMF website for 2022 or 21, and you'll get that figure. 7 trillion a year. And for all of those being in a Pollyanna mood about how renewables are reshaping our lives, they are reshaping our lives in Pakistan because we're making energy affordable. The solar revolution, which happened on its own because the photovoltaics came in from China very cheaply. What are we seeing here is, yes, that we've never seen this much investment in renewables so the world can breathe a little. We've done something right here, right? Globally, we've reimagined the future. Well, there's certainly the case, but please, that's added on energy. That's added on to fossil fuels, which are proceeding faster, much faster than renewables still. So it's not being substituted, which is what the global NDC deal is about, the energy transition is about. All of this is happening because people like to speak in silos. You will see many stalls in Brazil and billion talking about the fantastic energy transition, they must talk about it because people have to invest in hope and clean energy in the age of electricity, all of that. So we need to talk about finding that money. That money is entirely available, and you don't have to be an on-fringe activist to talk about it. It's important to do so. It's important to bring this discourse center stage. And I think finally, I want to say that Pakistan needs to also get its own house in order. That's a separate conference, Mr. Suleri, and I would urge us to partner in something called a Conference of Parties for Pakistan. The parties here are the people and the provinces. We all need to defragmentize our responses, bring them together, understand that from mountain to delta, we have a very variegated topography, and our adaptation goals must be brought into an alignment framework with even what we're doing internationally, let alone locally, so that people can come up, and communities are fantastic in Pakistan. Believe it or not, they come up with resilient, low-cost solutions. It's low-cost solutions that will matter for every province, for every district, and that needs to be organized at scale. I completely agree with Mr. Yaya. Small projects, the pilots, the endless pilots that come here and go away after the box is ticked, need to stop. If you can give us scale, give it to us, since it's one thing, like just depolluting a particular river or depolluting an area or building climate resilient agriculture in real terms in, say, just 2 provinces of the country. We have, those are the bread baskets, or addressing water scarcity in Quetta. Every province has its own crises, from glaciers to a drying delta. So with those words, I'm going to end, and I'm really going to ask everybody on this table to put their minds and resources together to plan on a conference of parties for Pakistan. We've been waiting too long for the world outside. It's time to look within as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Sharif Rahman, and indeed very valuable suggestions around convening a conference of parties at national level, because if we do not align our national agendas, then it would be really difficult to take up the case at international level. And for integrating South Asia region, it's also extremely important that we do that. And the time to do that is now. With this, I now invite Dr. Abid Suleri, Executive Director, STPI, and Chairman, Board of Directors, NDRMF, for his concluding remarks, please.
Just vote of
Vote of thanks.
I'll take 2 minutes.
Thank you, Zainab, and let me first appreciate the galaxy of panelists. I think this is the top-notch wisdom that we could have while discussing sustainable development beyond 2030. And as you could see after the very this knowledgeful scene setting by Dr. Ishrat Saab, demystifying the word disorder, we started discussing what can be done, and some of the commonalities which were, of course, mentioned by most of the speakers. It was about artificial intelligence and how it will be affecting our lives, whether it can be make or break. It was about Yahya and Harun, Sherry, all 3 of them. They talked of debt and debt reset. This is something we discussed in the last conference as well, Yahya, in your one of your keynote addresses, that countries like Pakistan, we should discuss debt swapping. We should discuss this debt resetting for moving forward. All I wanted to say that 2030, areas beyond 2030 will not be, the world beyond 2030 would be totally different from the world of 2015. We never know what would happen after 3 years in America, but one thing is sure, that populist sentiments and these mob sentiments, once the genie is out of bottle, it is too difficult to take it back. So the deglobalization process that have started, even if there is a administrative change in the United States, I don't see it getting reversed. Rather, with the European Union, the rise of nationalism, and even in countries like UK, I can see that this globalization, it is now becoming deglobalization, and that's where all the panelists, they talked of these local solutions, focusing on local solutions, because this era of global assistance, that's no more there. I think the idea of two ideas which appealed very much, and we should start working on it. One is this conference of parties in Pakistan, and second is about climate bank. I think this climate bank is an interesting idea. We should approach Nadeem to set up a climate bank, and it is a bankable idea. But on COP for Pakistan, STPI and Jinnah Institute will look forward to actually convene one maybe in spring, and try to see how we can take it further. I think all of these disorders, they have necessitated rethinking the social contracts. And this rethinking of social contracts in the age of disruption, this is where we require very candid, but of course, solution-oriented discussion. And that discussion perhaps would lead the way forward. In this conference during last 2 days, one thing that is also being discussed is mini-lateralism or mini-SARC in the region. The minister or advisor of government of Bangladesh for environment, climate change and forestry is here. And yesterday, she was very vocal in saying that in the region, the countries who don't want to be part of regional cooperation, they should wait. And those who want to be part of regional cooperation, they should come together, and we can think of a mini SARC. And of course, one country cannot hold this idea of regional cooperation hostage of geopolitical tensions. So I think while all these disruptions, they are affecting us negatively, they are also showing us the way forward. And the way forward is what was this evolution theory, survival of the fittest, which require adaptation. And the adaptation is what we are trying to discuss in the conference. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this plan.
Thank you very much. May I please request Dr. Suleri to present the shield to the chief guest and our publications, anthology. And ma'am, we have those recycled pots and everything in the expo. We would like to share it with you as well. So to the chief guest, and we have our publications, our anthology and journal for the panelists that were launched during the opening plenary of 28th Sustainable Development Conference. If the distinguished panelists can join us here so that we can have a group photo as well, sir. Colors of Pakistan. We have another publication for Dr. Ishrat Hussain, Colors of Pakistan, which is a book compiled by the diplomats, how they view Pakistan. They have taken photographs, and here it is, please.
As you flew all the way from the United States, to compile this colors of Pakistan through the eyes of diplomats. So the diplomats, they have taken this picture.
If sir, you can please present the shield to the chief guest, Senator Sherry Rahman.
The plastic shield and colors of Pakistan are both.
Plastic is not recycled.
And the shield. Okay. Why don't you also join?
All of the distinguished speakers, if you can join us here for the group photo, please.